So there's a non-insignificant amount of people out there that vouch for the idea that you should struggle with Elite when you're new. And to some degree, I agree with this. But I do think there are some things you should know about before getting into Elite. Some stuff that really probably should have been in a tutorial that weren't. So I'll give you 5 things with maybe even a bonus tip or 2. Number 1, make sure you are using the fastest route setting instead of economical. Economical might be good for like your first 1 or 2 trips maybe, but seriously, this is a big time waster. The difference is insane. Fastest uses the best jump range you have available to you at that moment, where economical is economical. It's all about fuel efficiency, so you're not jumping that far. I don't use economical almost ever. A little bonus tip in there is the term KGB foam. KGB, FOA, and M-class stars are refuelable, meaning if you have a fuel scoop on board, you can get fuel off of them without stopping at a station. It's also the first 7 stars in the star filter. You can even, at the bottom of that menu, apply the filter to your route, so you can literally make it so every jump you make is at a refuelable star. You can even sort out like particularly hot stars if you're worried about heat. There's actually a lot you should probably look into in the Gal map. It's a very powerful routing tool. Number 2 is SCO drives. So when you first start the game, you are in a stock Sidewinder. Now that Sidewinder's FSD, or frameshift drive, is a standard typical jump drive. If you're at a station that has them in stock, you'll see a version of that FSD in its stock that has SCO in brackets at the end. This stands for Super Cruise Overcharge, which is literally just the ability to toggle a very significant boost in Super Cruise. And there is literally no reason not to get SCO drives. They are better at their base jump range, and they enable every ship the ability to boost in Super Cruise. Now, this is very heat intensive and fuel intensive. Ultimately, you should still absolutely use it instead of not using it, but you might want to stock something like a heat sink if you're worried about heat. And keep an eye on that fuel gauge. You can also stock extra fuel tanks if you want, although I don't think you'll necessarily have to do that a lot. Now, there are SCO tuned ships. These are new ships that have come to the game very recently, within the last year, which means that they are extremely fuel efficient and heat efficient compared to the others, as well as a lot more controllable. Those ships are the Python Mark II, the Type 8, the Cobra Mark V, and the Mandalay. The Cobra Mark V is a general ship, while the other ones are specialized for certain professions. The Type 8 being mining, the Python Mark II being combat, and the Mandalay being exploration. Now, if you're watching this video soon after it comes out and you look in the store, you might not actually see these ships available, and that might be because they haven't formally been released yet. They're still in their early access period, which lasts a couple months before the ship comes out for everybody, as long as you're an Odyssey owner, that is. Anyway, next is PowerPlay. If you're a new player, PowerPlay is probably the most guided experience available to you. Now, that's not to say it's going to be intuitive necessarily or really super easy to grasp at first, because this is Elite Dangerous and that learning curve is kind of a staple of it, but PowerPlay offers all of the core professions contextualized to an entirely new form of progression that isn't just credits, but merits, which earn you buffs, also get you familiarized with the world and the different superpowers. It's a pretty good system, although it is quite grindy, so don't feel pressure like throwing your head at the merit grind right now, especially if you're super early. Right now, you should mostly be thinking about learning the gameplay loops, whichever ones you like the most, as well as, getting credits, upgrading your ship, and experimenting. But yeah, PowerPlay is a great resource for new players. Now, a couple notes on PowerPlay. You need to complete your weekly assignments once, and then you never have to do them again in order to actually get your loyalty rank, which is how you unlock all the rewards. If you were to look on the Gal map and click the PowerPlay map mode, there are 2 different buttons. The top one lets you sort by different states within different powers. The bottom one lets you set an activity filter, which lets you show different activity levels within different kinds of systems. Personally, I always throw it on the lowest because I think this filter by default is set way too high. Even on low, I think it's excluding probably a pretty reasonable amount of activity. It's just a quirk, I guess. Now, if you were to click on any given star system in PowerPlay, you will see different little books on the bottom right. The View Pilot's Handbook button is particularly useful because if you head to the Activities tab, you can see all of the different gameplay loops available in any of the different star systems. Now, you'll notice the terminology here is different to that map filter. You see the terminologies acquisition, acquisition conflict, reinforcement, and undermining. All you need to know, because it literally clears all of this up, is if it's a star system you own, you are reinforcing, which means all of the reinforcement gameplay loops apply to that system. If there's nobody in the system at all, it's an acquisition system, which means acquisition gameplay loops are enabled there. Now, if it's a system that's unclaimed but has multiple powers racing to claim it, then there will be two different thresholds you will see on the screen. A control threshold, and then behind it is a conflict threshold. What basically all of this stuff means, control score, control points, literally all that means is merits earned in the system, basically. So if you do stuff there and you earn merits, that's the impact you left on the simulation. But if one of the two teams is far ahead and reaches the control threshold, and the other team can't do it before the sim updates, then the team with the most control points takes the system. Again, control points is just merits earned there. And since that team now controls the system, they will be reinforcing it, and if you want to take it from them, you will undermine it, which again has its own list of gameplay loops in that book. Now, if it reaches conflict threshold, that's a different thing. It won't be the winner takes all system. Instead, a conflict state, or contested state as it reads in the map, will spawn, in which different gameplay loops happen. That's the acquisition conflict gameplay loops. The local activities list isn't all of the gameplay loops you're able to do. Those are your power-specific gameplay loops that offer a bonus in merits, but every power can do every gameplay loop. Okay, PowerPlay took up a lot more time than I thought, so let's get to the next one, which is nice and quick. Neutron jumping is something you should really look into if you're an explorer, or if you are trying to get somewhere quick. Neutron stars are kind of dangerous and can be deadly, so respect them, but once you get used to performing a neutron jump, it's no problem. All you need on board is a fuel scoop. If you have it, you need to kind of glide into one of the two tails of the neutron star. Now, I would recommend flying away from the exclusion zone when you do this, because if you hit the exclusion zone near a neutron star, specifically if you're in one of the arms, you are dead, basically. You are basically dead if you drop out of supercruise. Even if you're too close to it, you will gather a ridiculous amount of heat in normal space. So be careful, don't hit the exclusion zone, and don't drop out. Just constantly be in safe supercruise, and you will be fine. It'll warn you that your FSD is operating beyond safety limits, and then it will let you know that your FSD is supercharged. Now, when you do this, your FSD takes a little bit of damage, and at around 80%, the likelihood of a malfunction becomes something you have to consider. Basically, if you're jumping long distances, keep an eye on your FSD's health, because if it gets around 80%, and I'm talking once you hit 80%, maybe even 81, 82, you want to repair that module with an AFMU, which is an auto field maintenance unit. Deep range explorers sometimes even stack two of them so one can repair the other in the event of damage. Again, neutron star jumping is pretty safe once you get used to it. You can get a ton of distance with a neutron star jump. Just make sure you have a fuel scoop, make sure your FSD is over 80% when you try it. If not, you might suffer a malfunction which knocks you out of supercruise into normal space, which will kill you. You'll often hear about picking a home system in the early game. And while yeah, this can be a great choice, there are a couple regions of space you might want to consider before picking some random system. Specifically around areas like Bresla. Bresla is a star system that contains a starport called Isola Prospect. It's a surface port that has every module in stock in the game. The vast majority of them are in stock at Bresla always, albeit at a 10% increase in price. Later on, if you get elite rank in any of the different professions, which again is a whole grind, you don't have to throw yourself at that instantly. Upon reaching elite in anything, you are given the system permit for Shinrarda Desra, which is where Jameson Memorial, a starport, is located that is Bresla, but in space, which means it's quicker to land at, and sells everything at a 10% reduced cost. But here's the thing about Bresla. It's located in Imperial space. which means you'll have access to the opportunity to passively work your way through the reputation grind for the Empire if you're learning things like missions and gameplay loops, which gives you access to ships like the Cutter, which is an excellent large ship. But again, this is pretty lengthy, so you don't need to stress out about this immediately. It's just something to consider. And there's that PowerPlay consideration because it is in Imperial space. So basing somewhere around Bresla might be a consideration for you to have if you want to. I probably wouldn't recommend basing in Bresla, especially if you're playing in open play, because there are gankers out there that like to camp for new players. If you're playing in solo, I guess it doesn't matter, or a private group. But even if not, hopping into solo to get to Bresla is something every one of us does. And later on, Jameson Memorial is something that you can look forward to, but that's pretty way later on, to be honest. Now here's a bonus tip for you. I'm not gonna go into major detail here, but there's a couple nebula around the bubble that are worth being cautious of. I'm not gonna tell you why, and I'll only give you a couple of them. But the Witchhead, Pleiades, and Coalsack nebulae, let me just put it to you this way. If you're out exploring for the first time and you get all of your exploration data, if you die with that data before you sell it, you lose it. You might want to consider either going around these nebula or cautiously going through them. I'd go around them. You'll probably be fine. You might want to go around them. Thank you for watching this video. I've been kind of bouncing between a bunch of different video ideas because that last one did so well. I've been kind of thinking on iterating on it, but I also recognize that there's a lot of new players coming to the game right now, so it might be worth looking into educational content. If you did like this video, let me know. I'd be glad to make more of it. So anyway, see you around.